Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast with this week's guest, Jennifer Thietz. Jennifer has been a registered nurse for over 34 years, and she has a plan for a nurse movement that includes transformational change. She's working on publishing a book in this coming January 2024 that will speak to this, and it will include a self-care program for nurses. She spent over 25 years in the acute care settings, working in South Africa and California. And based on what she's seen, she's deeply concerned about what is happening in healthcare, particularly the plight of nurses. So let's welcome Jennifer to the show. Welcome to the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast, brought to you by The Nurse Speak, a show where we rally some of our nation's greatest nurse leaders, educators, experts, and advocates to tackle some of our greatest challenges that the nursing profession faces. My name is Damian Jenkins, and I'm your host for this show. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn that nurses can do anything. Okay, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me on the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast. Why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to the listeners? Let them know a little bit about who you are, where you started off in nursing, and where you are today.
All right. Thank you so much, Damon. It's a pleasure to be here.
My pleasure.
So I am one of the older nurses. I have been nursing for over 34 years now.
Wow.
And just as a little background, I started nursing a long time ago in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually born in Zimbabwe and grew up in Zimbabwe.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a Dominican convent high school, a boarding school, which spoke a lot about the value of caring. And I think I was almost I was not indoctrinated, but I understood caring from an early age.
Right.
Then at the age of 18, I moved to South Africa and I joined the Groote Hospital, which is where Professor Chris Barnard did the first heart transplant. And I started my career as a nurse, and I absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed every minute about that.
Wow. Awesome. Yeah. So you've been doing nursing for quite some time, and I imagine that you've been in many different settings, all kinds of different experiences, probably clinically, academically. So talk a little bit about, so you said where you started off. So fast forward a little bit and take us through a little bit of your progression, and where are you today with nursing?
Okay, so I worked in South Africa as a registered nurse for 18 years. Mm-hmm. And I worked in acute care mainly. I did do some hospice work. It was a wonderful experience. Mm-hmm. However, the crime got bad at one point there, and we decided to make a transition. And I was recruited by an international nursing agency, mm-hmm. and was very lucky and was given the opportunity to move with my family to California, which we did in 2003. And from 2003 until just over a year ago, I was nursing in acute care as well in California.
Okay.
And again, it was a delight. I really, really enjoyed nursing. But about 3 years ago, I noticed that things were not feeling the same as they were for me. And I realized that I was starting with quite severe compassion fatigue. And eventually, I got to the point where I realized I just wasn't able to nurse like I wanted to nurse.
Right.
And this is when I left. Yeah.
Got it. So you've left clinical nursing because you haven't left the profession, right? You still have your nursing license. You're still a nurse.
Yes, very
right?
much so. So yes. Now I'm still nursing, and mm-hmm. I'm doing some consulting.
Okay.
But I left bedside nursing about 15 months ago.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, do you think the pandemic had anything to do with your decision?
Yes, it really
mm-hmm.
did.
Of course. Yeah. Many of us suffered a lot of traumas through the pandemic, working through all of that in an already increasingly difficult role. There's so many things that we can talk about related to the issues that plague nursing. And I think we're on a track to identifying one of those major ones here on this episode. So all right, so let's get into it, right? So you left bedside nursing. Obviously, there was a reason. You mentioned just briefly that you didn't feel like you could do the nursing that you wanted to do anymore, and I think
Right,
that's
right,
a big thing that affects a lot of us. Is we sign up to care for people, to educate them, to protect them, to enable them to be able to manage their disease or even reverse their disease if possible. And we find too many times that we're not able to really do any of that, that in fact we're just putting a band-aid on a festering wound, and we're not doing anything to really stop the infection or the hemorrhage, if you will, right?
right.
And we get frustrated and we get burned out and we
Yeah,
decide that this just is not in alignment with what we want. And so then we look for alternative means to leverage our skills and knowledge as nurses, which it sounds like is what you have done.
right.
But
That's exactly right.
but let's talk about your story. Let's talk about what is the thing, right? What was the
Right.
thing or the catalyst, the challenge, if you will, that you identified that you wanted to work towards solving?
Right. Well, this book, Nurses Matter, that I wrote,
Mm-hmm.
is really a summary of what I experienced
Mm-hmm.
as a bedside nurse and as certainly as an oncology nurse navigator.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what is happening is that nurses just do not have the support that
Right.
they need in order to do their jobs. And so what's happening is we're having nurses who are having to do their nursing specific tasks,
Mm-hmm.
but they're also having to do things like go and do bathroom breaks for patients, hand out trays,
Mm-hmm.
so many other tasks that are not nursing specific.
Right.
And I think what's happening is we as nurses are constantly being distracted
Yes.
and pulled in five places.
Yes.
And this is a real crisis.
Yeah, real
And I think it
crisis.
has to stop because this is where compassion fatigue and certainly burnout, where I experienced it, was this fact that everything was so frenetic and I was torn in a thousand different places,
Mm-hmm.
and I just wasn't able to give the care and the real compassion to my patients, not because I didn't want to, because
Right.
I did want to, but just because I wasn't able to with the way nurses are working now.
Right, exactly. And so I'm glad you rephrased your 5 different ways to 1,000 different ways, because I was going to say five, that's a great day if you're only being pulled in 5 different ways. But yeah,
Right,
it truly feels like 1,000 different ways in a shift as short as 8 hours, right? A
right,
lot of
right.
acute care nurses, for instance, work 12-hour shifts, and some nursing home settings work 12-hour shifts. But largely nurses in this country work 5 days a week,
Yeah,
Monday through Friday, maybe rotating weekend schedules, and they work 8 hours every day, if not 12 or 13 or 14 hours every day, because of the
right.
crossover from coming in early to get started and staying late to finish up things. And you're right, nurses are expected to do way more than what our specific roles and responsibilities are assigned in the clinical spaces. And you mentioned some of the tasks that we would consider something that unlicensed assistive personnel could do, like a CNA, for instance. And the nurses are often tasked with handling those skills because we don't have enough CNAs to assist.
Mm-hmm.
Because just like nurses, they're also burned out. They're realizing that it's not worth the amount of work, for the amount of pay, if you will,
Yes,
benefits, and then also the moral injury that they sustain on a daily basis because of the way the healthcare system is designed. And then another thing that's even worse than that, I feel, because at least those tasks are still in alignment with the role of the nurses, organizations are pushing nurses to basically be their own leadership, right? They're
right,
expecting them to handle grievances. They're expecting them
right.
to handle, customer service issues, risk, all of the injuries or accidents that happen. They place so much burden onto the nurses to tie up the loose ends, when in fact it should be organizational leadership that takes on those roles and responsibilities. They're tearing apart educational initiatives and bringing what would normally take 5 qualified nurse educators to facilitate the ongoing training and professional development of the staff to one person, if you're even lucky to have one.
Right.
Right. So there's a lot to be desired in the terms of being supported in
Right.
organizations, and not every organization is guilty of this. Many of them are doing really great jobs, but on the majority, like largely, many organizations are not meeting the mark. And it's, in my opinion, it's because of the way that our healthcare system is so business focused,
Right.
money driven, which it's not a bad thing to want to make money. I'm a business person myself. You're a business person yourself. We have to make money in order to grow and develop. But there has to be a certain budgetary, constraint where you say, all right, we have to tap into profit margins to put back into the professional development. And if anyone can prove that to an organization, nurses certainly can, right? We know how to collect that data and present it to leadership in a way that's going to make sense for them, if they just gave us the time of day to listen. If they just listened and saw us beyond our role as a nurse and actually valued our ability to critically think and create solutions for them. So, yeah. So, okay, go ahead.
So what you're saying is so true. Firstly, our nursing assistants, our auxiliary help are priceless.
Yeah.
And we can't do our job without them. So that I really have deep respect for them. And I really hope that this nurse movement that I'm hoping to start with my book, that we can really work together to get nursing assistants, ward secretaries, back into the workplace, because we are a team, and that's how we give excellent care. And you're right also when you say that there are many organizations that are not like that. I had a conversation a couple of days ago with a nurse, and she was just saying how wonderful her organization is. So it's certainly not everybody. But as you said, a big trend is, I believe, is cutting costs. And then what happens is that they cut staff. And, I've done a lot of research for this book, and I've spent the last 9 months really, really going into this book in great depth and going into the research. And currently, in order to turn a nurse around in healthcare, it costs about $52,000 nationally. And when you think that a nurse assistant or a ward secretary, they're earning around $36,000 per annum. When you think if we could just add that extra nursing assistant to possibly a team of 1 to 5, in a perfect world where we could have 1 to 5, 1 nurse to 5 patient ratios, then we would have, we would have an extra ward secretary, and we would have, if there are 25 patients, we'd have an extra 5 nurse assistants. So that would mean 6 extra staff, which would come in for a company at around about $218,000 per annum. Now, when you think that just to turn over 4 nurses in a year is costing over $200,000, then you realize that there are ways that we can mitigate this. There are ways that we can mitigate this without breaking the bank. And I think it's up to us nurses, like you are doing now with your podcasts, and like I'm trying to do now with this book, is just to get that message out there that number one, there has to be change. We don't have a choice.
Correct.
I had a person who was saying, change is not on the menu. And that's exactly right. It's not on the menu. It has to come. So let us do it in a controlled, calm, collaborative way, so that we can, number one, help our patients, because that's why we show up to work every day, is for our patients. They must be the beginning of the discussion and the end of the discussion. And, making money, et cetera, should be something that, yes, we need to do, as you said, but it should be something that's way, way behind the scenes, because healthcare should not ever be a money-making machine. We're here to provide care.
Of course. Yeah. And anytime you incentivize anything for money, there's the potential for that to be the primary driver. And, you lose sight of the initial mission, vision, and values, right? So, I would say that most of us go into nursing because we have a desire to help others. And it largely, nurses give a lot away because of that. We give a lot of our time, our energy, our education, our consulting, even our skills. We volunteer to help people in crises. We sign up to do vaccinations when, pandemic comes out. And we don't expect, and we don't expect money in return. If we get
No.
money in return, fantastic. We're not going to say no, right? But it's not necessarily our primary driver. And
Right.
organizations like hospitals, nursing homes, unfortunately, they don't open unless they can project to make a certain amount of money.
Right.
And so there has to be, again, a strong collaboration between the business folks and the clinicians. And I'm sure you yourself have just seen so many situations where there was a zero collaboration,
Yes.
despite our pleas for,
Right.
that
Right.
collaboration. So, all right.
Yeah.
So you wrote this book because you saw a major need, right? A need
Mhm.
to help folks. And so part of it sounds like your message is to be able to empower nurses so that way they can continue to position themselves where they can be a bigger influence in the healthcare space to try to get these changes to happen while also making sure that they're protecting themselves, right? And finding ways to thrive within the profession. Does that sound about right?
You've hit the nail on the head. That's perfect. I mean, I could have been writing that in my book. So yes, you're 100% right. So I think the message in this book really is that we are powerful.
Mm-hmm.
We are very special people. And I mean, every nurse knows that because we deal with nurses all the time.
Right.
We are very special. We are exactly as you say, very caring. We are bright.
Mm-hmm.
We have so many skills. And I think we can use what we have in our settings to really start to, number one, increase the conversation about what we need and what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, to reach out and start collaborating. Because I think our nurse leaders are many of our nurse leaders are struggling, must be, when you think of what they're up against. Of course, they play a role in the company, and their job is to help with the budgeting, etc.
Right.
But on the other hand, they're nurses. No matter whether you're the chief nursing executive or anybody else, you're a nurse. And so in your heart is always with your patients. So I think if we can, as nurses, be empowered through this book, I've really gone into a lot of detail looking at compassion fatigue, burnout, the background, nurse bullying, many other facets of nursing that are having a huge impact on our nurses. And I think if we have that information and we realize who we are and how powerful we are as a tribe, I think we can really start making changes. And I don't think we can afford to wait. It's too desperate now. The wonderful thing about the situation now is that every single American, no matter from President Biden all the way down, every single person is going to require healthcare. So this is a conversation that should deeply interest and involve every single person. And when you think of it, it's not just us as nurses, it's our children, our grandparents, our sisters, our husbands, our lovers, whoever. Everybody is going to be involved in or needing healthcare. So it's a win-win for everybody. And I really have hope. I think we can do it.
Of course we can. And so, I'm so glad that we have connected here because I don't know how much you followed my podcast episodes or you see on social. I'm, amazing nurses in my network who are on the forefront of creating this change. We have folks who are trying to change political laws and regulations. We have folks who are trying to petition for legislation to have part of the funding for nursing to be a public utility, if you will. That way, organizations don't have to bear the brunt of 100% of our salaries. People who are launching their own entrepreneurship empires, creating their own healthcare services outside of traditional healthcare services, since those systems are failing them or failing our patients and our communities in which we serve. Many nurses I know are going back or have already gone back and received like their nurse practitioner certifications and licensure, and they're opening their own primary practices and really taking back the power of being able to deliver care in the way that care should be delivered. So there's a lot of amazing things that are happening in nursing, and now is truly such an exciting time to join the profession if you're not already in it, and for you to position yourself within this network of folks that you and I are both creating around us, because
Right.
we truly are making some major waves in how we
Yes.
do business nowadays in
Yeah.
healthcare, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So, I mentioned in the intro to this podcast that your book is going to be available January 2024. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. So
Awesome.
it's titled Nurses Matter, and
Hmm.
it's coming out in 2024. I
Awesome.
do have a draft coming out in mid-October. So if anybody's interested in actually seeing the book before, before it comes out, I can very happily send them a draft. But
Awesome.
yeah, I've got great support, and I'm excited. I think this is exactly as you say, this is the time to be a nurse.
Yeah.
We are going to make history. What we're doing now matters. Nurses matter like they've never mattered before.
Right.
So I'm really, really excited about what we can achieve together.
Awesome. And so if someone wanted to see uh, maybe that draft, or if you have social handles that people could connect with you, a website, where could they find you if they're looking to learn more about you, your career path, any products or services you offer? Because you said you do consulting, and then
Right.
to look forward to that book sale.
Yeah, thank you, Damien. So everything is still in the works. I'm actually at this stage, I'm not going to give you my new and improved website,
Okay.
but it'll come out there and it'll be with a draft if
Yeah.
anybody's interested. Of
Sure.
course, I'm very reachable on LinkedIn,
Sure.
and would love to hear from anybody there. Who's interested.
Mhm.
And it's been such a pleasure. I've met so many people doing exactly what you're doing, just meeting over a Zoom call.
Yeah.
And it's just filled me with a great deal of energy and excitement about what's coming down for us, for all of us as nurses.
Well, look, I personally appreciate the work that you're doing and all of the work that you have given to patients and the nursing profession. We truly are a team sport. If it's not for us, then we would be nothing. So I be able to speak and connect and share ideas. And I really want to make sure that we continue these conversations. There's so many amazing things going on. And if you're not part of the National Nurses in Business Association, I recommend that you do join that organization and possibly link up with us in our annual Entrepreneurship and Career Alternatives Conference that we host every year. Michelle Podlesny is the president of the organization, fantastic, and the entire board of directors are all powerhouses in nursing who have
Lovely.
leveraged their skill set to create the career path that they find to be most in alignment with their skills as a nurse. We have, the Healthy Workforce Institute that helps organizations, not just healthcare, but organizations in general, dismantle workplace bullying and incivility, really leveling up those
Brilliant.
leadership skills. And this is all done by a registered nurse. We have, the Foot and Nail Institute, which is a registered nurse who identified the gap in the lack of care that elders specifically get with podiatry services, how limited those podiatry services were, and how the feet of these elders still were having major problems just because no one was setting them up with the
Right.
continued care that they need.
Right.
Not only did she become wildly successful, but now she's teaching other nurses how to create their own. I have nurse skincare experts who can help people figure out how to create their own skincare organization and do something that they love with their nursing skills and still take care of patients. We have
That's
education and
brilliant.
consulting. We have elder care. We have so many options as nurses. Truly, the sky is the limit. Our healthcare system needs us. We don't
Yes.
want to remove all of our nurses from the bedside. We don't want to
No.
remove all of our nurses from our primary healthcare services. In fact, we might want to pluck them out for a year to train them up and put them back in, because
Yes.
then they would be able to make more of an impact. So I myself continue to bounce in and out of the clinical setting so that way I can learn additional skill sets to bring back to the clinical setting, so that way I can have more of an impact. And I'm in a leadership position as a director of education and staff development, which is
Right.
a huge role for supporting nurses, which is
I
exactly
love
what
it.
you say is one of our biggest issues. And it is such a big issue that 6 months out of nursing school, that was my calling. I said, you know
Right.
what? I'm getting no support as a new nurse. Nursing was not my first career, so I was very well versed in how to work, conflict resolution, communication skills, time management. I worked in the food and hospitality industry for 15 years, opened stores, trained front of the house staff. So I only really had to focus on the nursing specific skill set. So the people skill set came naturally to me by the time I
Absolutely,
was
which
a
is a
nurse.
huge advantage.
Huge advantage, but they weren't ready for me, right? When I first came out, because they're like, who's this new nurse who thinks all of this? So, there was a few rough patches initially because I'm very confident when I see an issue and I, going to the director of nursing or the educator and saying, look, I think it would be better if we did it this way. They didn't know how to handle that because they weren't used to new nurses being so upfront with not only identifying the issues, but also offering solution at the same time.
Right.
I guess they expected me to complain, but that's not my motive. I'm not going to complain. I'm going to say, hey, let's try it this way because I think it would work.
And if we had more nurses like you, I don't think we'd be in this situation. I think,
correct.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we want our new grads to do.
Correct. And so, being able to convince leadership, and again, the ones who make decisions about the money,
Right.
to convince them that we do need these extended orientations. We need these professional development in services and courses where we can focus on high quality education and training and not pull them off the unit mid patient care and expect them to focus and be engaged and take away these skills. That type of education has never worked.
No.
And it's certainly not helping anything in this situation.
And it's vital to educate correctly.
Yeah. Absolutely. So from academia all the way through clinical, there's so many gaps in the educational process. And it's something that I've been working on for the last 10 of my 14 years as a registered nurse. And it's going to be something I continue to work on because it is truly my passion. So,
right. I can see that. And we're lucky to have you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Well, look, Jennifer, I really appreciate you coming on the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast with me. I'm looking forward to your book. I can't wait to get my own copy. And so I can make that a recommendation. I will have your LinkedIn in the show notes of this episode for everyone to connect with you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. And I hope to visit Mexico soon, which is
well, you can always come and have a margarita with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And lovely. Take care. We'll be in touch soon.
Thank you. That sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed myself. Thanks.
My pleasure. Bye-bye. And that concludes episode 7 of season 3 of the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast with this episode's guest, Jennifer Thietz. We hope that everything we shared for you in this episode will help you leverage your skill set, your knowledge, and align with your passion so that you can have the nursing career that you both want and deserve. All the ways to connect with Jessica will be in the show notes of this episode. And as always, if you have any questions about anything that we shared in this episode or in any other episodes, feel free to visit thenursepeak.com/contact and get in touch with me. I would love to have a conversation with you. So until next episode, take care, be well, and remember that nurses can do anything.